Kalen's feet sank slightly into the mossy ground as he stepped into the forest that everyone in the village called cursed. The villagers' warnings had followed him like a shadow all his life. Never go near the pack. They are not like ordinary wolves. They are alive with old magic, and their alpha is no man to challenge. He ignored them. All his life, he had been laughed at, mocked for his small stature and timid ways. Even his own family had dismissed him as weak. If he could survive the forest, perhaps he could find a place where he belonged. Perhaps finally he could prove himself. The forest was dense, dark, and alive. The trees arched high into the sky, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. A mist clung to the ground, swirling around Kalen's ankles as if testing him. Somewhere in the shadows, he could hear the distant howl of the pack. It was not a sound of ordinary wolves. It carried power, authority, and an unspoken warning. Turn back, human, or perish. Kalen swallowed his fear and moved forward. He had seen the stories of the Alpha, a creature both terrifying and majestic, who ruled the pack with silent authority. It was said the Alpha had lived for centuries, bound to the forest by a curse he could not escape. No one dared approach him, and yet Kalen felt drawn to the legend, as if an invisible thread pulled him closer. As he neared a clearing, the pack emerged from the shadows. Their eyes glimmered in the dim light, silver and amber reflecting a fierce intelligence. Kalen froze, feeling the weight of 100 gazes upon him. Whispers of fur and snorts of curiosity rippled through them. "You dare enter our forest?" one of the wolves said, his voice rough, carrying a human-like sharpness that made Kalen start. I seek to join the pack," Kalen replied, his voice shaking but firm. Laughter erupted, a chorus of sharp, cruel sounds. Kalen flinched as the pack circled him. They sniffed him, growled low in their throats, and exchanged looks that said he was not one of them. "You?" another wolf said, stepping closer. "You are too small, too weak. You are human. You have no place here." Kalen's heart pounded. Every insult, every laugh felt like knives pressing into his chest, but he straightened his shoulders and lifted his chin. "I may be human, but I can learn. I will prove myself. I will not leave until the Alpha decides my fate." The wolves stared at him for a long moment. Some snarled. Others simply tilted their heads, bemused. Then, the leader of the group, a massive wolf with eyes like molten silver, stepped forward. His fur shimmered with an otherworldly glow, and the air around him seemed to ripple with power. Kalen's breath caught. This was the Alpha, the one everyone feared, the one who ruled the pack with silent strength. He was larger than any wolf Kalen had ever seen, yet there was something human in his gaze, something that made Kalen's heart both tremble and ache. "You are bold, human," the Alpha said, his voice deep and calm, carrying an authority that silenced the pack's laughter. "Or foolish, perhaps both." I seek your guidance," Kalen said, his voice barely more than a whisper. The Alpha circled him slowly, eyes never leaving Kalen's. Kalen felt exposed, as if the wolf could see every thought, every fear, every hidden desire he had buried deep inside. And in a strange way, Kalen wanted him to see it. He wanted the Alpha to understand why he was here, why he could not be cast aside. "You will be tested," the Alpha said finally. "The forest does not grant power to the weak. Survive the night and you may stay. Fail," he let the words hang in the air, "and you will not live to see the dawn." Kalen nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He had expected danger, but the weight of those words pressed heavier than anything he had imagined. The pack murmured among themselves, some sneering, others watching with cautious interest. Night fell quickly, and with it, the forest came alive. Shadows stretched long and twisted, whispers of wind sounding almost like voices. Kalen moved as silently as he could, following the Alpha's instructions. Hunt for food, navigate the terrain, and avoid the hidden dangers that lurked beneath the thick mist. Hours passed. Kalen's hands bled from thorns, his legs ached, and hunger gnawed at his stomach. Yet he pressed on, driven by determination and a flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, he could belong. Then, without warning, a creature leapt from the darkness. A monstrous wolf, larger than any Kalen had ever seen, its eyes glowing with malice. He stumbled back, frozen in fear. The pack had warned him of such beasts, guardians of the forest, sent to test intruders. Kalen scrambled for a branch, trying to defend himself. The beast lunged again, teeth bared. His heart raced, his vision blurred. Just as the wolf's jaws snapped dangerously close, a silver shadow flashed across the clearing. The Alpha appeared, moving with a speed and grace that seemed impossible. The monstrous wolf yelped, yanking back, and then froze under the Alpha's gaze. Kalen watched, breathless, as the Alpha's presence alone bent the creature to submission. "You are reckless," the Alpha said to Kalen, his voice calm but edged with something sharper. "But you survive. That is the first lesson." Kalen's knees shook. He wanted to thank him, to bow, to kneel. But the Alpha simply turned and vanished into the trees, leaving Kalen alone with the defeated beast. The other wolves slowly approached, their expressions unreadable. Some were impressed, some resentful, and some simply wary. Kalen sank to the ground, exhausted and trembling. Pain and relief battled within him. He had survived his first trial, but he knew it was only the beginning. The pack's laughter had not fully faded from his ears, and he knew they would watch him constantly, waiting for him to falter. As the mist thickened around him, Kalen felt a strange stirring in the forest, a whisper he could not quite understand. "You have been chosen. You do not yet know why, but your path has begun." Kalen's heart pounded. The words, or was it a feeling, sent both fear and hope coursing through him. He knew that surviving the pack's scrutiny, the forest's dangers, and the Alpha's enigmatic gaze would not be easy. But he also knew that for the first time in his life, he felt alive. And then, just as exhaustion threatened to pull him under, a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. The Alpha had returned. His silver eyes glimmered in the moonlight, and he stepped beside Kalen, silently standing as if claiming him in a way that shocked the pack. The other wolves froze, uncertain, their laughter replaced by a tense silence. Kalen's heart thundered in his chest. He did not understand the Alpha's motives yet, but he knew one thing clearly. His life and his place in this world had changed forever. The Alpha's gaze met his, unyielding and intense. In that moment, Kalen realized that the forest, the pack, and this mysterious, powerful Alpha had chosen him for a purpose he could not yet see. And somewhere deep inside, a spark of something daring and dangerous ignited. A spark that whispered, "This is only the beginning." The forest seemed to hold its breath, shadows swirling around them, as the Alpha silently stood beside the human who had dared to enter a world that had never welcomed him. And for the first time, Kalen felt that perhaps he was not alone. The forest was quieter than usual that night. Mist curled around the trees like silver ribbons, and the moon hung low, bathing the clearing in pale light. Kalen could still feel the weight of the Alpha's presence beside him, as if the very air had shifted. The pack watched silently, their eyes filled with uncertainty, grudging respect, and a touch of fear. Kalen's legs trembled from the events of the day, but he forced himself to stand tall. He was not used to feeling this kind of attention, this kind of scrutiny. The Alpha's silver eyes followed him wherever he moved, unblinking, measuring, testing. Kalen wanted to speak, to ask questions, to demand answers, but his voice caught in his throat. Instead, he simply bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the silent judgment. The alpha, Riven, Kalen had learned, though he still dared not speak the name aloud, circled him slowly. His movements were fluid, almost predatory, yet there was an elegance that made Kalen's chest tighten. It was clear that Riven was both ruler and protector, a creature shaped by centuries of battle, grief, and solitude. "You survived the trial," Riven said at last, his voice calm but deep, carrying an authority that silenced the pack. "Few could have done what you did. Fewer still would have stood when I appeared." Kalen swallowed, his heart pounding. I want to belong," he admitted, his voice trembling but earnest. "I want to learn. I want to serve the pack, and you." The alpha's eyes narrowed slightly, as if studying the truth behind Kalen's words. "Belonging is not given. It is earned," he said. "And you are far from earning it." Kalen's shoulders slumped, but he nodded. He expected this. He knew the pack would not accept him easily. He had lived his life in the shadow of others' laughter, and he had grown used to rejection. But something in Riven's gaze, something unspoken, made him believe that this time might be different. "Follow me," Riven commanded, turning away. Kalen hesitated for only a moment before trailing silently behind him. They moved deeper into the forest, the mist parting as if bowing to Riven's presence. The pack watched them leave, whispers flowing through the trees like wind. Some were curious, some resentful, and others cautious. Riven led Kalen to a hidden clearing, a sacred space where the forest seemed to breathe differently. The air was thick with ancient magic, and the ground was carpeted with soft moss and glowing mushrooms. Shadows shifted in strange, deliberate patterns, as if the forest itself was alive, watching. "You will learn the ways of the pack," Riven said, his voice softer now, though it still carried an edge. "Not through strength alone, but through understanding, loyalty, courage, and control." Kalen listened carefully, drinking in every word. He had always known he was weak, but he also knew that there was more to the world than brute strength. Perhaps this was the moment he had been waiting for, the chance to prove that courage and heart could matter just as much as muscle. Riven extended a single silver claw toward Kalen. "Touch it." Kalen hesitated. The claw shimmered in the moonlight, faintly warm, almost alive, but something in the alpha's gaze pushed him forward. He reached out, his hand brushing the claw. The moment their skin or fur touched, a strange warmth surged through him. It was not pain, nor fear, but something else, something ancient and binding. "You feel it," Riven said quietly. "The bond. It is not permanent yet. It can be broken, but it marks you as chosen or necessary." Kalen felt a shiver run through him. He did not fully understand what Riven meant, but he knew it changed him. The forest seemed to lean closer, as if listening to their heartbeat. The mist swirled, shadows danced, and Kalen realized that the alpha's power was more than physical. It was something older, something that could bend the forest itself. "Why me?" Kalen asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. Riven's eyes softened slightly, though the intensity never left them. "Because you dared," he said simply, "because you did not run when all others would have, and because the forest chose you, whether you understand it or not." Kalen swallowed, his chest tightening. Fear and awe warred within him, but he felt a flicker of pride, too. For the first time in his life, someone powerful, someone legendary, acknowledged him. Over the following days, Kalen began his training under Riven's watchful eyes. It was unlike anything he had ever known. The lessons were harsh but subtle. He learned to move silently, to read the forest, to sense the intentions of the pack and the hidden creatures that lurked beyond sight. He learned patience and strategy, and most importantly, he learned to trust his instincts. The pack did not welcome him easily. Many sneered, some attempted to humiliate him, and others openly challenged his presence. Kalen endured every trial, every insult, every attempt to drive him away. And through it all, Riven never intervened unless the threat was truly dangerous. It was as if the Alpha wanted Kalen to understand that belonging was not given lightly, but the tension between them was more than training. Kalen began to notice the subtle ways Riven observed him, the tilt of his head, the faint flicker of approval in silver eyes when Kalen succeeded, the quiet, unspoken communication that passed between them in silence. Kalen found himself drawn to the Alpha, not just in awe, but in a deeper, more confusing way. He felt warmth in Riven's presence, a pull he could not explain. He began to wonder if Riven felt it too, an unspoken connection that stretched beyond words, beyond understanding. And though he tried to deny it, a small part of him hoped that the Alpha's gaze would linger just a little longer, that the bond would deepen. One night, during a hunt, the pack was challenged by a rival clan of wolves. They were larger, stronger, and more ruthless than Kalen had ever imagined. The rival pack sought to claim the forest, and the Alpha's authority was threatened. Kalen's first instinct was to hide. Fear gripped him, and his legs refused to move. But then he saw Riven at the forefront, standing tall, silver eyes glinting with unyielding strength. The Alpha was calm, almost serene, yet the tension radiating from him was enough to make Kalen's heart hammer in his chest. He realized in that moment that if he wanted to belong, if he wanted to prove himself, he could not falter. He could not run. With shaking hands, Kalen lifted a fallen branch, gripping it like a weapon. It was crude, weak, and barely more than a stick. But he remembered Riven's words: courage, loyalty, understanding. And in that moment, he understood that his courage mattered more than the branch in his hands. He stepped forward, standing beside Riven. The pack murmured in surprise. The rival wolves froze for a moment, taken aback by the human's audacity. Kalen's heart pounded, but he forced himself to meet their gaze, unflinching. And then the Alpha's presence washed over him like a wave, calming, powerful, undeniable. Kalen felt a surge of confidence, of belonging. He could not explain it, but he knew he would follow the Alpha anywhere. The battle was swift and fierce. Kalen did not strike a killing blow, but his presence and determination distracted the rivals long enough for Riven and the pack to gain the upper hand. When the dust settled, the rival wolves fled into the darkness, leaving the forest silent once more. Kalen fell to his knees, exhausted and trembling. Riven approached him, silent, his silver eyes unreadable, and then, for the first time, he touched Kalen's shoulder, a gentle, deliberate gesture that sent a shiver down Kalen's spine. "You survived again," Riven said softly, "and you chose to stand when fear might have claimed you. That is rare." Kalen looked up, breathless, and for a moment, their eyes met. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, shadows dancing in the moonlight as if acknowledging the bond forming between them. Kalen felt something stir deep inside him, a mixture of pride, fear, and a longing he could not name. He did not fully understand the Alpha's motives, nor did he understand the strange pull he felt toward Riven. But he knew one thing: his place in the pack, in the forest, and perhaps in the Alpha's life, had shifted forever. As they returned to the clearing, the pack watched in silence. Whispers of admiration, curiosity, and begrudging respect flowed through them. Kalen knew that his journey was only beginning. The forest was still dangerous, the pack still wary, and the Alpha's secrets still hidden. But Kalen had survived. He had stood beside the Alpha. And in the quiet, glowing light of the forest, He felt something he had never felt before: hope, belonging, and the faint, undeniable spark of something far greater than fear. The forest had grown colder, darker. Mist curled thick around the ancient trees, carrying whispers that Kalen could not understand. The pack moved silently through the shadows, their senses alert to every rustle, every movement. But even among them, tension hung heavier than usual. Kalen could feel it pressing against his chest like a weight he could not shake. Riven led the way, his silver eyes glinting in the dim light, unblinking, measuring. Kalen followed closely, trying to match his calm, controlled movements, but he could not stop the questions swirling in his mind. The Alpha's power was immense, beyond anything Kalen had ever seen, yet there was a sorrow in those eyes, a depth of loneliness that pulled at him and terrified him at the same time. "Why are we moving deeper?" Kalen asked, his voice low, almost afraid to disturb the heavy silence. Riven did not answer immediately. The Alpha's gaze swept over him, sharp and assessing. "Because the forest calls us," he said finally, "and because you must see it for yourself." Kalen nodded, unsure if he truly understood. He had survived tests. He had fought beside the Alpha, and he had proven his courage to the pack. Yet there was still something Riven had not revealed, a secret that lay buried in shadows, older than Kalen could imagine. Eventually, they reached a clearing unlike any Kalen had seen before. The ground was cracked with deep fissures, glowing faintly with a silver light. Strange plants, black as night, twisted skyward, their leaves shimmering like glass, and at the center, an ancient stone altar rose, covered in carvings that seemed to move under Kalen's gaze. "This is where it began," Riven said quietly, his voice softer than Kalen had ever heard. "Where the curse was placed upon me centuries ago." Kalen swallowed, his throat dry. "A curse?" Riven's silver eyes darkened. "Long ago, I defied a sorceress who sought to claim the forest's power. In her anger, she bound me here, cursed me to protect this land until one worthy soul could stand beside me and awaken the bond that might set us both free." Kalen's heart pounded. He had felt the strange warmth when he touched Riven's claw, the bond that surged between them. Now he understood. It was tied to this curse, this ancient, unbroken magic. "You," Kalen said slowly, "you've been alone all this time." Riven's gaze fell. For a moment, he looked less like an Alpha, and more like a man burdened by centuries of solitude. "Not entirely," he said. "I have the pack. I have the forest. But there is a part of me that cannot rest, cannot be whole until the bond is fulfilled." Kalen stepped closer, drawn to him despite the fear curling in his stomach. "And this bond, it's with me?" Riven studied him for a long moment, and Kalen felt the weight of his scrutiny. "It is not yet," he said. "The bond is dormant, waiting, and the forest will test you, as it has tested me." Before Kalen could ask more, the ground beneath the altar trembled. Shadows twisted unnaturally, forming into figures that flickered between the living and the spectral. The forest's magic was stirring, and Kalen realized that this was no ordinary threat. The rival pack had returned, but they were not alone. Dark shapes moved with them, spirits of the forest, bound by the same curse that had trapped Riven. Their eyes glowed red, their movements unnatural, and their snarls carried a cruel intelligence. Kalen's chest tightened. He had survived before, but this was unlike anything he had faced. He glanced at Riven, who stood calmly at his side, silver eyes bright in the darkness. "You must trust yourself," Riven said, his voice steady, grounding Kalen in the chaos. "Courage alone will not be enough. Use your heart, your mind, and your instinct. This is your trial." Kalen nodded, gripping a fallen branch tightly. His hands shook, but he forced himself to step forward, standing beside Riven. The Alpha's presence washed over him like a shield, steadying his heart. For the first time, Kalen understood what it meant to be truly part of something greater. The spirits lunged. Kalen dodged, barely aware of his own movements. He had no idea how he knew where to go, how to anticipate their strikes. It was as if the forest itself guided him, whispering answers in a language he did not understand but somehow felt in his bones. Riven moved with deadly grace, striking with claws that shimmered like silver blades. Kalen followed, blocking attacks, distracting foes, and slowly gaining confidence. The bond between them, though unspoken, pulsed stronger with each shared movement. Kalen could feel Riven's power flowing into him, steadying him, amplifying his courage. And then one spirit, larger and darker than the rest, surged toward Riven. Kalen reacted without thinking, throwing himself between them. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he held his ground. The Alpha's eyes softened, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. "You will not fall," Riven said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Not while I stand." Kalen's heart thundered. For the first time, he realized he was not just following Riven, he was protecting him, and in doing so, he felt a strange exhilaration, a connection that was both terrifying and thrilling. The danger, the fear, the need to survive, it all wove together with something else, something he could not name. Together they fought. The rival pack and the spirits could not withstand their unity. Kalen discovered strength he had never known, courage he had never believed he possessed. When the battle ended, the forest was still once more, the mist curling gently around them as if sighing in relief. Kalen collapsed to his knees, exhaustion threatening to claim him. Riven stepped close, placing a hand on his shoulder. The touch was light, almost tentative, yet it sent a warmth through Kalen that went far beyond the physical. "You have grown," Riven said softly. "Faster than I expected. The bond, it awakens, even in its small way. You are not yet ready, but you are closer than you realize." Kalen looked up at him, eyes wide, chest heaving. "Closer? To what?" Riven's gaze softened, though the silver eyes still held centuries of sorrow. "To understanding. To standing beside me as more than just a follower. To being the one who can help lift this curse. But the forest will not give you more than you can bear. There is danger ahead, greater than what we face tonight." Kalen nodded, determination flaring within him. He would face whatever came next. He would not falter. Not now. Not ever. As the mist thickened, Riven turned and led Kalen back to the pack, walking silently, side by side. The other wolves watched in awe, respect, and jealousy mingling in their eyes. Kalen realized he had changed, not just in strength or skill, but in courage, in presence. He had survived the forest, faced the curse's shadows, and stood beside the Alpha. Yet even in triumph, a shadow lingered in Kalen's mind. The sorceress's magic, the curse that bound Riven, was far from gone. It stirred in the distance, watching, waiting. Kalen felt it in the chill of the air, in the whisper of the wind, in the eyes of the pack as they moved silently through the forest. And he knew deep down that the true trial, the one that would test his heart, his courage, and his bond with Riven, was only just beginning. As they reached the clearing where Kalen had first met the Alpha, he dared to look at Riven. The Alpha's silver eyes met his, unreadable yet filled with something Kalen could feel but not name. Desire, protection, something older, deeper, and terrifyingly intimate. Kalen's chest tightened. He wanted to speak, to ask, to confess the feelings stirring in him, but no words came. Instead, he felt the pull of the bond, stronger now, vibrating between them like a heartbeat. It was a connection that would not be denied, no matter how much fear or doubt lingered in the shadows. The forest seemed to hold its breath, mist curling around their feet, shadows stretching long and silent. And somewhere deep within, Kalen knew that the curse, the danger, and the Alpha's secret were not just threats. They were a call to face his fears, to embrace the bond, to step into a destiny he could not yet see. And in that moment, Kalen realized that he was no longer merely a human seeking to belong. He was part of something greater. He was part of the Alpha's world, the forest's magic, and a bond that might change them both forever. The forest was silent, but the silence was heavy. Mist swirled thickly around Kalen's feet, carrying a chill that seeped into his bones. He stood beside Riven, his heart pounding, knowing that the true test of courage, loyalty, and love had come at last. For days, the forest had grown restless. Shadows moved where there should have been none, whispers followed their steps, and Kalen could feel the stirrings of the curse deep within the ancient trees. It was no longer just a threat, it was a force gathering strength, and it would not rest until it had claimed what it desired. Riven's silver eyes glimmered in the dim light, reflecting the forest's quiet tension. He moved with his usual grace, but Kalen noticed the slightest stiffness in his posture, the subtle weight of centuries pressing down upon him. The Alpha's gaze met Kalen's, calm yet intense, as if he were measuring his courage one final time. "You are ready," Riven said softly. "But the forest does not forgive mistakes. It will challenge you both, mind, body, and spirit, and it will test the bond between you." Kalen swallowed. He had faced fear before, fought for survival, and even stared into the darkness of the forest's magic. But this felt different. It was as if the trees themselves had come alive, whispering warnings in voices older than time. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Shadows coalesced into forms taller and darker than any wolf Kalen had seen. Eyes glowed red, teeth glinted in the pale moonlight, and an unnatural chill swept the clearing. The curse had awakened fully, responding to their presence. Kalen gripped a fallen branch, shaking yet resolute. He glanced at Riven, whose presence alone steadied him. For the first time, Kalen realized the full depth of their connection. Not just a bond of survival, but something far older and stronger. Something that could overcome even the forest's dark magic. The spirits lunged. Kalen moved as instinct guided him, dodging and blocking, surprising himself with strength and agility he had not known he possessed. It was as if Riven's power flowed into him, steadying his steps, sharpening his senses. He was no longer just a human trying to survive. He was part of the forest, part of the Alpha, part of something that transcended fear. Riven struck with deadly precision, silver claws flashing in the dim light. Kalen followed, blocking attacks, distracting foes, and moving in harmony with him. Every glance, every motion, every heartbeat was synchronized, a silent dance of trust and courage. Kalen realized then that this was more than survival. It was proof of the bond the forest had whispered about. A figure emerged from the shadows, larger and darker than the rest. The air grew colder, heavier. Kalen could feel its power pressing against him, threatening to crush his will. But he did not falter. He stepped forward, placing himself between Riven and the shadow. I will not let it harm you," Kalen whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The shadow hesitated, as if recognizing the courage in him, the bond that tethered him to Riven. Then it lunged. Kalen reacted, blocking its strikes, dodging, and countering with every ounce of strength and instinct he had learned. Pain shot through him, but he stood firm, driven by something deeper than fear, loyalty, determination, and a connection he could not name. Riven moved beside him, powerful and precise, striking with the force of centuries of experience. And then, as if drawn by the bond, their attacks flowed together, seamless and perfect. The shadows faltered, retreating before their unity. Kalen felt a surge of warmth as Riven's hand brushed his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of his courage. For the first time, he understood what the Alpha had meant when he spoke of the bond. It was not just survival, it was trust. It was understanding. It was a connection that could change everything. The largest shadow, sensing defeat, recoiled, its form twisting and writhing. Kalen stepped forward, reaching deep within himself, drawing upon the courage, the loyalty, and the bond he shared with Revan. He spoke a word he did not fully understand, a word the forest seemed to recognize, and the shadow screamed before dissolving into mist. The forest was silent once more. Mist curled around them, softer now, almost gentle, as if acknowledging their victory. Kalen sank to his knees, exhausted, his body trembling from the effort. Riven stepped close, placing a hand on Kalen's shoulder. The touch was light, deliberate, and it sent a warmth through Kalen that went far beyond the physical. "You have done what few could," Riven said softly. "You have faced the curse, the forest, and yourself, and you have stood beside me. The bond, it is awakened. You are no longer just a human. You are part of this world, part of me." Kalen looked up at him, chest heaving. "But the curse?" Riven's silver eyes softened, though their intensity never faded. "The curse is old, but it can be lifted. It requires more than strength. It requires trust, courage, and the bond we share, and you have proven you are worthy." Kalen's heart raced. He had survived, yes, but it was more than that. He had grown stronger, braver, and he had awakened something he had never expected, a connection to the Alpha that went beyond admiration or fear. It was something intimate, something ancient, something that bound them together. The pack emerged from the shadows, their eyes wide, a mix of awe and respect in their gaze. They no longer whispered or mocked. Kalen realized that he had not only survived for himself, but had proven his place among them. He belonged. He had earned it. Riven turned to him, eyes bright in the pale moonlight. "You have changed," he said softly. "And I have changed too." Kalen's chest tightened. He knew what Riven meant. The bond had not only awakened in him, but in the Alpha as well. The loneliness, the sorrow, the burden of centuries, all of it seemed to ease slightly in the presence of this human who had dared to stand beside him. They moved closer, the forest around them alive yet calm, as if recognizing the culmination of the trials. And in the quiet, Kalen felt a warmth bloom in his chest, a feeling he had never known before. He wanted to speak, to tell Riven what he felt, but words were unnecessary. The bond, the courage, and the shared trials spoke louder than anything he could say. Riven extended his hand, silver fingers brushing Kalen's. The touch was light but grounding, a silent promise of trust, respect, and something far older and deeper. Kalen met his gaze, understanding at last what it meant to truly stand beside the Alpha, not as a follower, not as a weak human, but as a partner, a companion, and perhaps something more. The forest seemed to sigh, the mist curling around them in a gentle embrace. Shadows retreated into the darkness, the curse's power subdued, its threat diminished by the unity of human and Alpha. Kalen felt it, the forest's magic, alive and protective, acknowledging their courage and the bond that had been forged in the trials. For the first time, he felt free, not just from fear, not just from the mockery of others, but free in a way he had never imagined. He belonged. He had earned his place beside the Alpha, and in doing so, he had changed both himself and Riven. The pack gathered around them, silent but respectful. Whispers of admiration, curiosity, and quiet awe flowed through the clearing. Kalen realized that he had not only survived the forest and the curse, but had earned the respect of beings stronger, older and wiser than himself. Riven's eyes met his once more, and this time there was no judgment, no testing, only acknowledgement. Only the quiet, unspoken recognition of what they had endured together and the bond that had been forged. Kalen's heart swelled with something he could not name, pride, love, and a deep sense of belonging all at once. The trials were over, but he knew their journey had only just begun. The forest, the pack, and the bond they shared were alive, and there was still much to learn, much to protect, and much to explore. He stepped closer to Raven, feeling the warmth of the Alpha's presence, the steady heartbeat of someone who had once been bound by centuries of sorrow and magic, now connected to him in a way that neither could deny. The forest was quiet, the mist gentle, the shadows at peace. And in that moment, Kalen understood the truth of Riven's world, the depth of the bond they shared, and the power of courage, trust, and love. He had survived the forest, stood beside the Alpha, and awakened a connection that could not be broken. And as he looked into the silver eyes that had haunted his dreams and his fears, he knew that together they could face anything, even the lingering magic of the forest, the shadows of the past, and the challenges yet to come. The Alpha placed a hand lightly on Kalen's shoulder. The touch was both grounding and intimate, a silent promise that they would face the future together. Kalen felt a warmth bloom in his chest, a quiet certainty that he had found his place, beside the Alpha, within the pack, and in the forest that had tested him so fiercely. The night was calm now. The moon cast a gentle light over the clearing. The mist curled like silver ribbons. The trees stood tall and silent, and the pack rested, their leader at the center, beside the human who had dared to stand with him. And in the quiet, Kalen knew that he had found more than courage, more than belonging. He had found the bond of a lifetime, a connection that would endure beyond fear, beyond time, beyond the forest itself.